So, good afternoon, everyone. This side Sanjay Suman from Social Auditor Organizations. So, today's our guest faculty is Dr. S.K. Gupta, sir. Is a postgraduate in Commerce, Gold Medalist, FCS, MCMA, and Corporate Governance with over 42 years of corporate experience in leadership positions with various public and private sector organizations in the domain of finance, costing, internal audit, sustainability, integrated reporting, and company secretarial function. Currently, Dr. Gupta is the managing director of Registered Valuer Organization of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India. He is also chief executive officer of ICMAI, Social Auditor Organization. Dr. Gupta has chaired and addressed a large number of national and international seminars and conferences. He is a member of various industry associations. He is a prolific writer. He has written over 25 articles and research papers, which are regularly published in the various professional national and international journals. He is currently guiding 5 PhD scholars. So I'm welcoming to Mr. Dr. Gupta, sir, for this program. Welcome, sir, and good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. Namaskar and welcome to everyone for sparing your time.
Good afternoon,
this
sir.
Summer Sunday afternoon for joining me on this webinar on carbon credits in agriculture and sustainable farming being organized under the aegis of ICMAI Social Auditors Organization. Our organization had been organizing various webinars and virtual sessions on various aspects of the domain of CSR and ESG over the period of last about 2 months. And continuing with that, the next edition of that is what I'm going to present today on the concept of carbon credits, so far as they are applicable in the domain and dimension of agriculture and how they are concerned and related with the aspect of sustainable farming. You know, we all understand that agriculture plays a very critical and important role in the economic development of a country. There are primarily 3 sectors of any economy. You have agriculture, you have industry, and you have services. Agricultural sector may not be dominant in terms of proportion of contribution to GDP, but it is a vital link in the various aspects and domains of economic development. This is a concept and subject which is an interface between E, that is environment, and S, that is social, in the overall macro concept of ESG. Agriculture is an interface between environmental and the social dimension of the ESG concept. All of us have written essays during our school days, class 6, class 7, class 8. And the first line we used to start the essay with was that India is predominantly an agricultural country. हमने हिंदी में भी लिखा है, and then we used to write भारत एक कृषि प्रधान देश है. At that point of time, a few years back, a few decades back, the contribution of agriculture to the GDP of the country was a higher proportion. But over the years, the structure and architecture of the economy has evolved, and the contribution of services sector now is predominant at about 55%, with 30% being contributed by industry, with only about 15% being contributed by agriculture. But that's not the key issue. Let's not go only by the numbers. Agriculture is a very, very dominant and important interface between environment and social aspect of the concept of ESG. So we're going to talk about how agriculture interfaces with the environment as well as the society. And especially we're going to talk about the concept of sustainable farming and how we can decarbonize, minimize the accumulation of carbon in the environment and thus prevent climate change, more specifically global warming, by preventing carbon to escape from the earth and evaporate into the environment. That's what we are going to talk about in the topic of carbon credits in agriculture and sustainable farming. Just give me a second. Let me share my presentation on the screen, please. Thank you. So, of course, the beautiful planet that we all live in, yeah, we have aspirations of also exploring Mars, also exploring Moon and some other galaxies in this environment. But nonetheless, the planet that we have, the place where we live, this is a beautiful planet. There's a lot of beauty all around us, natural beauty. You have water, you have forests, you have flowers, you have agriculture, you have green, you have just about everything. But the beautiful planet today is also facing a huge challenge. One of the important issues that all of us are facing today is how and where we produce food. We have 7 billion people on this planet as of today. By 2050, the number is going to be increased by 2 billion more. How do we provide food for all the population living on this planet? How we produce food and where we produce food? I think it has a direct nexus and a direct linkage with the kind of planet we are trying to build all around us. A planet which is sustainable, a planet which is a good place to live in. How do we feed all those people who are going to live on this planet? And another critical aspect is the economies of all the countries of the world are growing at very, very fast pace. And it is moving people from the bottom of the pyramid, and thus more and more people have better economic levels, better income levels, and high proportion of the total income available to the people is going to get spent on food. So it's not only a challenge of how do we feed the existing population, but the challenge is how do we feed the increasing numbers, not only numbers, but people who will have more wealth in their hands. Major part of that is going to be spent on food and food concerned items. Agriculture has a very close nexus with the environment. The kind of agricultural practices you adopt, the kind of crops that you produce, the kind of farming practices you produce and use, they have a very, very direct nexus and connect with the climate. There is a long list of various activities that we do which lead to carbon emission. And in my previous session, I was talking about when the carbon is released from the planet, from the earth, it goes into the environment, then it creates a layer which prevents the heat of the earth to go beyond that particular layer, and that leads to greenhouse effect, global warming, with all antecedent and concern connected unfavorable impacts on this planet. But many of us may not be rationally aware that agriculture is one activity which is a huge source of carbon emission. What does agriculture have to do with global warming? Well, there is a huge connect. This presentation will provide a perspective and a basic understanding as to why it is important to take cautious actions to reduce the flow of carbon from the earth onto the environment, and what agriculture can do to prevent carbon escaping the earth. It will also identify the ways how farmers can generate agricultural or soil-based carbon bank and carbon credit. And then you can sell that carbon credit, you can exchange that carbon credit and generate additional revenue from anything anywhere between $8 to $20. You can exchange that carbon credit, and that could probably be an additional source of revenue for you in addition to your agricultural activities. So carbon emissions from other sectors, but there are a lot of dimensions of agriculture which also lead to emissions of carbon from this planet. Manure management, the tilling practices that you follow, the harvesting practices that you follow, the use of synthetic fertilizers, cultivation of organic soils, and burning of crop residues are some of the major reasons and causes which lead to carbon escaping the earth and going into the environment, which is undesirable. How do we get better productivity out of soil? That's when the health of the soil is good and it is maintained in such manner. When the soil health is good, it will give you better productivity. But the intensive application of fertilizers and pesticides has depleted soil carbon levels. And when the carbon level goes down in the earth, that's a sign, a real sign of degradation of the health of the soil. Carbon acts as a sponge which absorbs a lot of water, which absorbs a lot of nutrients, which are very, very essential for the earth. Doesn't let them go out. It acts as kind of a sponge. Soil comprises of organic matter. It consists of carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, but majorly, approximately around 50% of the soil organic matter is made up of carbon. The quantity of carbon present in the earth is a very, very good indication of the overall health of the soil, fertility of the soil on which farming is being done. In one of the research papers published in 2017, Australian microbiologist and climatologist Walter Jean said, the Earth's soil carbon sponge, which is formed by the mixture of mineral and organic stuff in air, has a very high level of capacity to absorb the rainwater, improve access to essential nutrients, and it also supports a wide range of microbial processes. Importance of carbon in the soil. And therefore, he goes on to say, when soil carbon levels drop, the ability of the soil to absorb and retain water also goes down. And thus, it constrains the effect of rainfall on the soil and leaves the topsoil prone to runoff and erosion, leading to cycles of floods and droughts. And therefore, carbon sequestration. Sequestration means it's a practice of removing carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in the earth. By the process of carbon sequestration, we can increase soil carbon levels at the ground and reduce carbon dioxide levels in the environment. And thus there are dual benefits. It helps mitigate the negative impact of climate change, and it's also a positive factor for the agriculture. So what is carbon sequestration? Carbon sequestration is the process by which the air's carbon dioxide is extracted and stored in a soil carbon pool. It's simple enough. We don't want high level of carbon presence in the atmosphere. So we are trying to get it out from the environment, extract from the environment. On the other hand, we want a high quantity of carbon to be present in the earth. And we want that carbon present in the earth should not escape the earth and should not move up and go into the environment. That's the double action wagon that we are looking at. Extracting carbon from the environment and keeping it as a store to act as a carbon sponge in the earth. So how do we do that? Photosynthesis is the natural process where the plants break down carbon dioxide and water from the atmosphere into oxygen, sugar, and carbon-rich compounds. These reach the roots of the plants and the soil down under, and it nourishes the earth, the soil, and the organisms below the soil. The reduction of biomass below the soil and increased soil erosion and higher tilling causes a higher percentage of carbon dioxide which gets released into the air. When you have to sow a crop, what do? You till the land. When you till the land, the carbon escapes from the earth. What do you do then? That's a normal process of agriculture. You got to till the land. I'm going to talk about various techniques. One of the techniques being suggested now is no-till farming. No-till farming, yes, where you insert a seed directly down under the earth without actually tilling the land the way we do it naturally and traditionally. So we have a very common CO2 cycle, which we all have studied as part of our educational course in the school, in the college. Maybe you know quite a lot about that, even otherwise. That's a normal CO2 cycle. Through the process of photosynthesis, CO2 enters the leaf, and then it gets down to the roots, and then it goes into the soil. And that's where we want to maintain it and not allow carbon to escape from the soil, escape from the root. And that's where agricultural practices play a very, very important role in preventing escape of CO2 from the earth. So what are the practices that farmers can follow to restore soil health? What are the practices that farmers can follow which reduce the loss of carbon from the soil? Cover cropping, to keep the land covered at all times. That means even you may be sowing seeds at a distance of maybe 3 inches apart. Good enough. But then the area which is exposed to natural light and sunlight, it might create different ways and actions, natural actions, by which carbon might escape from the earth. One idea suggested is cover cropping. Keep the entire area of your field covered with maybe crops which can be sold, which are cash crops, maybe non-cash crops, But if you keep the whole area covered, it reduces the extent to which the CO2 will escape from the earth. Recycling the soil's bio-waste. What kind of manure, compost, and fertilizers you going to use? How do you do crop rotation, intercropping? What kind of irrigation practices you follow? When farmers follow these practices, the carbon content of the soil improves. But all of you will agree with me, nobody would say no to doing all this, which is required to maintain the carbon content in the earth. But they say, what is the incentive that I have? Why should I do it? Let someone else handle it. I will do traditional farming the way I have been doing for a number of years. Why should I bother? Let other people think about it. That means farmers need an incentive to adopt these regenerative agricultural practices, which may be unremunerative in the short term, which may be time consuming, which may also include a lot of expenditure. And that's where the concept of carbon credits plays a very, very important role in bringing about this desired change in the agricultural and crop practices. The latest farm product, carbon credits. Carbon credit monetization can just be the nudge that is required by the farmers to move towards sustainable farming practices. All of us certified social auditors are going to have a huge role to play in the agricultural sector, helping out farmers, helping out various NGOs connected with agricultural activities, trying to create awareness with regard to the importance of maintaining the carbon pool on this earth and towards sustainable farming practices. And that's where we also need to tell them, when you follow sustainable agricultural practices, it's not only good from commercial point of view or from the point of view of the green economy, it's also going to provide you additional revenue over a period of time going forward. Carbon credits are certificates that represent quantities of greenhouse gases that have been kept out of the air environment or removed from it. What is a carbon credit? You know, there are various countries, there are various activities that we pursue, both in the industrial and the agricultural sector, which lead to more and more carbon being produced. If an industry or a farmer or a farmers producers organization at a larger macro scale adopts certain practices by which he reduces the escape of carbon from the earth, he may have to incur extra effort for that. He may have to incur extra expenditure for that. And then we are ready to compensate that particular action of that FPO, Farmers Producers Organization, or individual farmer to a certain extent. There are companies which are mandatorily emitting carbon. They just can't help it. I mean, there's no alternate available as of now based on the technology. They have to emit carbon, but then it gets counterbalanced by some other people who are reducing the emission of carbon by cutting down on those activities and taking on alternate technological measures. And thus there is a buyer and there is a seller. The seller is the person who reduces the carbon emission, and the buyer is who continues to emit the carbon because probably he just can't do anything about it. Industry or agricultural activity, or because he's not able to do to the extent required. He's willing to pay a price for that. And he's willing to pay some extra benefit incentive to the person who is actually able to do that. And that's how the carbon credit gets exchanged between two parties. One party which is reducing the carbon emission, the other party which pays for that, which pays for those kind of efforts, at least in part. Companies and governments purchase carbon credits through the OTC, over-the-counter exchange, to meet the climate commitments that they have made as part of Paris Climate Agreement, or even internally, many of the companies across the world, including that in India, have set for themselves specific targets of reducing carbon emission by a certain basis percentage points every year, over a period of 5 years, over a period of 10 years. They are going to be the purchasers of the carbon credit from those people who actually do something for reducing the emission of carbon by way of their alternate practices and strategies. Carbon can be thought of like a crop. It is similar to different crops that you produce on your farm. A carbon credit or a carbon offset represents either greenhouse gases removed from the environment or greenhouse gas emissions reduced. In the case of farming, carbon credits are created how? Based on how much carbon dioxide you draw down into your soil and how much of GHG emissions you reduce above the soil. And there is a trading market for that, which is kind of a system of exchange where the persons who emit carbon are the buyers, and the persons who draw carbon out of atmosphere, they are the sellers, and exchange of carbon credit happens between these two entities. Idea is that companies responsible for emitting carbon dioxide have to reduce their emissions or pay for the efforts of other people who can prove that they are doing some work for reducing or removing CO2 from the air, or for the purpose of absorbing more carbon dioxide down the earth. The other party has got to pay something to this particular group of people. What makes a carbon credit valuable? What is that activity by which you can say you have created a carbon credit, and now that you have a carbon credit with you, you can sell it out in the market and get some additional revenue? The carbon credit must be real. They must be generated through complete, accurate, and must be determined through accounting methods which are very, very thorough, which are slightly complicated, technical. We may not be experts in those particular aspects. There are professionals available in the marketplace who will do the work for you, who will provide professional support for you, but you, as the facilitator between the farmer and these professionals, will play a very, very important linking part, where you link the two together and facilitate the process of reducing carbon from the atmosphere and having more carbon sponge and more carbon pool down there in the earth. Carbon credits are created when you do some additional work. That means, very important word here, that would not have happened without the incentive provided by the carbon market. If you keep on doing what you have been doing for a number of years, and you say, I have a carbon credit, that's not the way. You've got to put in some extra efforts, different kind of technology, different kind of farming practices, and then probably, yes, it's going to cost you more. Yes, it's going to involve a lot of more extra efforts, but that's how. You got to show to the other party that you have done something to reduce the carbon emission or reduce the carbon content present in the atmosphere, which would not have happened if you had continued with your traditional farming practices. The change has to be permanent. That's the difference between, we all understand from finance background, cost reduction, cost control. Cost reduction is not if you have been able to reduce your expenses in one particular month or for 3 particular months. That's not cost reduction unless it is sustained over a long period of time. The same concept plays out here. There's got to be change in the carbon stock on a permanent basis. And of course, yes, this has to be verified by way of third-party assurance. It has to be verified by way of independent appraisal to be carried out by third-party auditing. Uniquely claim credits are owned by one entity at a time from creation to retirement. Now, what is carbon credit? What do you do with that? It's a farm product, but you can't eat it. You can't drink it, but you definitely can trade carbon credits. The direct benefit for the farmers is they receive cash-based incentives for the carbon they have helped sequester in their lands. A farmer who sequesters one carbon credit can earn approximately $8, maybe roughly about 800 rupees, and the rate also goes up. It's a market, so the rates keep on varying from time to time, depending upon the demand-supply position. And the rate for one carbon credit can also go up to $20. As per experience, farmers who follow regenerative, sustainable farming practices are able to sequester 1 to 4 carbon credits per acre. I mean, you can, simple calculation, you can find out how much additional money a farmer can generate by going in for sustainable farming practices, regenerative farming practices, and then exchange the carbon credit for a certain monetary value. And there are indirect benefits also. The indirect benefit is that farmers will have improved soil condition because of carbon getting captured in the soil. What is soil health? Increased water holding capacity, lower soil density, increased water infiltration, increased availability of nutrients, and decreased soil surface temperature. These are all very, very simple indicators of the health of the soil. So while it is easy to talk about carbon credits, how does it actually work in real life situation? Now, on one side, you have small farmers, individual farmers having a few acres of land, doing farming, whatever. And then you also have large organizations, FPOs, farmer producer organizations, which are carrying out farming on a very, very large scale. So what FPOs can do? The first step is to promote regenerative agricultural practices amongst their farmer groups. Because if we start following sustainable farming or regenerative agricultural practices, our soil health will improve, carbon deposit in the earth will improve, but it's not going to happen over a short period of time. It's going to take definitely longer, and therefore FPOs need to follow the farmers, handhold them over a long period of time, support the farmers at least during the initial years. Or you can also do, you can identify an agri-technology partner or a project partner. There are quite a few of them, quite a few of these companies which enable the farmers to adopt sustainable and regenerative farming practices. But then, once you go for trading of carbon credit, there is a requirement of third-party verification. Somebody has to finally assess, verify, certify that yes, this carbon credit has been earned by virtue of either reduction of carbon presence in the atmosphere or by way of more carbon deposits getting accumulated down there in the earth. And this process of certification assurance obviously takes time. It usually takes about 8 months to 12 months time from the time the project is listed for the credit carbon market. Carbon credit market consists of two different large players. You have speculators and you also have pilot project developers. Speculators, by their very nature, they expect a remarkable growth in carbon markets in the next few years. There are investors who try to contract large acreage and they can to trade as many carbon credits as possible. On the other hand, there are smaller players who work on a pilot project basis. Pilot project developers are people who connect with the growers or the farmers, get 10 farmers together, then get 50 farmers together, look at their regenerative farming practices, create a carbon pool, and then start generating carbon credits and trading them. Pilot project developers actually act as intermediaries between producers and buyers of carbon credits with agricultural products. Both speculators and the pilot project developers have a common goal: generating carbon credits and using and leveraging carbon credits to promote sustainable farming practices so as to reduce the carbon emissions from the earth. Of course, there are challenges. It's not as simple as it is made out to be. It's an emerging area, and there are challenges. Verification and accurate accounting of carbon is a challenging aspect. Once the project is identified, it takes about 8 to 12 months for the cash incentive to arrive to farmers. And then it may take 12 to 18 months for a project to be listed for the carbon credit assessment and carbon credit certification. Roughly, we're looking at 2.5, 3 years time cycle over which a project which is piloted to be a cash credit generating project, the money when it reaches the hands of the farmer or the farmer producer organization, it may take anything from roughly about 25 months to 30 months. Amount of carbon credits received may not be enough for a small farmer to adopt regenerative agricultural practices. But nonetheless, awareness over a period of time, pooling of farmers together, cooperative farming, farmer-producer organization definitely can provide a base for which the farmers can get together. They can start generating carbon credits by way of sustainable farming practices, and thus this can actually become a fast-growing action cycle. How do we make carbon credits interesting and acceptable to the farming community? First is to need to create awareness about the existence and benefits of carbon credit program. As per McKinsey report, the demand for carbon credits is expected to increase by approximately 15 times. I'm not saying 15%, it's 15 times by 2030. As a result, market prices of carbon credits are going to improve. How the demand is going to increase? How will it increase? All the countries today are carefully looking at their commitment to the Paris Climate Agreement and the Climate Change Management Agreement, where they are required to cut down the level of carbon present in the environment and to also reduce the emission of carbon. In case they are not able to take such actions on their part, they can contribute to this particular action and activity by purchasing carbon credits from others who do certain actions. That's how the demand for carbon credits is going to increase significantly by 2030. And when the demand goes up for carbon credit, definitely the price of each carbon credit hopefully will also improve significantly. The process of measuring and verifying carbon credit is also improving over a period of time. It's evolving, improving rapidly due to technological development. How do you find out, how do you measure how much of the carbon is stored there in the earth in a particular field, maybe 10 acres plot? There are techniques available. You use satellites, you use drones. There are other kinds of techniques available by which you can actually measure the amount of carbon which was present 5 years before in that chunk of land and the quantity of carbon which is present now after 5 years, after following certain regenerative and sustainable farming practices. So over a period of time, the measurement and verification process is likely to become more structured, more rational, and probably more simpler. Governments are doing a lot of work at their own level, at the center and the state level, to align existing agricultural farming practices with the evolving practices of sustainable farming by bringing farmers within the fold of carbon credit programs. All of this is definitely going to lead to a change in the mindset of the people, as well as change in the entire agri ecosystem going forward. Maybe 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, is going to definitely improve and go towards a definite change. There's already a lot is happening in US, Europe, and Canada. The United Nations Growing Climate Solutions Act gives authority to the US Department of Agriculture to help farmers to take part in carbon credit markets. The US government also supports the development of voluntary market for agriculture carbon credits. European nations also encourage farmers to shift to regenerative farming. In Canada, you have a Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, which is looking at providing the farmers carbon credit mechanism and architecture. Over 20 million metric tons of carbon emission reductions have already been achieved in Canada from agricultural carbon credit projects in Alberta and other places. A lot of work is being done in the US, the European market, and Canada in the domain of carbon credits. So going a little more deeper into what is regenerative farming or what is sustainable farming. Many conventional farming practices cause global warming and severely damage natural ecosystem and habitats. Over farming. Farmers try to take 3 crops, 4 crops, 5 crops, because that's where the money is. And they use too much of the chemical inputs. And thus, it depletes the water resources, and it also cuts into the health of the soil over a period of time. It also leads to soil erosion. It destroys habitats. It might so happen over a period of time. If we don't stop the current traditional farming practices now, it may lead to widespread desertification that will make the earth barren. Everything will become desert. Regenerative farming practices degraded land back to nature. They provide and hand over degraded land back to nature. They let the ecosystem store CO2 by using soil as a carbon sink. Regenerative farming will also help boost wildlife and promote biodiversity. So what are sustainable farming, regenerative farming techniques? No-till farming. Don't till the land. This will reduce soil disturbance, which is caused by the process of tillage. Reduce the use of synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. How do we do that? Mob grazing, manure and compost. Maximizing soil coverage, that's soil cover, through living roots. Promoting crop rotation. Combining livestock rearing with crops and other plants. By creating grasslands and growing cover crops, which will help you to capture carbon, which will help you to not to allow carbon to escape the earth and go into the atmosphere. And the best part is, all this the farmers can do while earning money by and through the process of carbon credits. Earth will become a desert, desertification, if we don't follow regenerative, sustainable agri practices today. In a given number of years in future, the whole earth may turn into a barren land, a very, very scary scenario for all of us. When a farmer adopts regenerative farming practices, the land goes from being a net emitter of carbon to an entity which stores carbon. In other words, it becomes a carbon sink. Reduction or sequestration of carbon by regenerative farming practices can lead to creation of carbon credits, which can be sold, by which you can also earn some extra money because these can be monetized. Slightly technical, there are certain carbon accounting models and tools which are available. We all need not get into such a detail. We are not experts in that area. Let's all accept that. There are people who are experts in that area. We only need to get connected with them. But just to name a few, and just as part of my research in this area, ex-ante appraisal carbon balance tool, which is used to calculate the emissions and uptake of carbon by the project. You can look at it at this website. Then there is rapid carbon stock appraisal system to assess landscape carbon stock. You can visit this website and find out the details. And then there is a carbon accounting software, Comet Farm, which was developed by USDA and Colorado State University, which is very, very scientific method and model for accounting of the carbon that we are talking about. So why farmers should grow cover crops? I said, try to keep the earth covered with whatever way it is possible. Cash crops, non-cash crops, simple grass, simple weeds, let it be anything for that matter, but let the whole earth be covered by some kind of a cover that will help you to store more carbon in the earth. So what are cover crops? Cover crops are different from cash crops. They are planted without the intention of harvesting. They protect the soil from erosion and also improve the nutrient conditions of the soil. Cover crops are becoming popular as the world fights climate change. They now account for almost about 43% up from the regenerative practices followed earlier by the cover crops. Yes, you are right. Someone has commented in the chat box that regenerative agriculture practices were being followed in India in the past. Yes, that's absolutely true. But the problem is getting compounded day by day by the total availability of earth remains the same, increasing population, the requirement of getting more and more crops out of the same land. That's all what is leading to a whole lot of problem that we are facing in this modern world today. But yes, it is a very, very old practice that was being practiced in ancient India, no doubt about that. Popular examples of cover crops are barley, oats. Some of the cash crops are converted into biofuel or fed to animals, but leaving them to break down in the soil is best for environment because doing so can help the soil sequester carbon. Someone has asked a question, existing crops, are they entitled for carbon credits, or it is only the incremental crops which can produce and generate carbon credits? We discussed in the earlier slide, how do you earn a carbon credit? When you say that by adopting certain regenerative and sustainable farming practices, you've been able to either reduce the level of carbon present in the atmosphere or increase the level of carbon present in the earth by following certain methods which are other than the natural traditional methods you have been following a number of years. You have done something different. You have done something extra, more effort, different effort, extra investment. And as a result of that, some new carbon deposits have been created, which has increased the mass of carbon in the earth. So simple answer to your question is, it is only applicable to incremental crop, not to the existing crops. Thank you.
Sir, can I ask a question as a
Yes,
supplement to that? I had
Yes,
actually written that question in the chat box.
Yes,
The
sir.
challenge that is coming up is that there is no baseline study available for the present crops, and therefore the calculation of an incremental is becoming a bit of a challenge.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely right. Because unless you have a baseline study or some kind of a measurement, what it was 5 years back, and then you can measure it today. But the start has to be made somewhere. Someone has to take a baby step. Right now, we are talking about it, growing awareness in the marketplace. Even if there is no baseline study available as of now, in the past, let us at least create now for the future. I mean, that's only what I can say at this moment of time. Someday somebody has to take a step, maybe a baby step to start up the entire process. So even if some kind of baseline study is not available in the past, you're very right about that. Why not let us take a step now? Create a baseline. 5 years later, 10 years later, we will have a baseline against which the incremental deposit of carbon, increase of deposit in carbon soil can going forward be measured. But otherwise, you're absolutely on dot. There is no baseline study as of now which is available in most of the parts of the world, not only India, but in most parts of the world. But when we talk about climate change, it is not a short-term discussion or a short-term consideration. We are looking at decades ahead. We're looking at 2050, we're looking at 2070, we're looking at 2200. That's what we are looking at. If we don't forecast and foresee at least 30, 40, 50, 70 years ahead, the danger is that everything will get extinguished. We just may not survive on this planet. Someone has to start thinking long term, and that's where we can start thinking now and probably start looking at creating a baseline now, today, for the future. So cover crops can also generate carbon credits for that, because they will help you to store more carbon in the earth, not allow the carbon to escape the soil of the earth, maintain the quality of the earth going forward. This is how cover crop looks like. There's no inch of piece of land which is visible. Everything is covered, All these are not cash crops. In between, there may be certain plants which are cash crops, which will be cut and sold in the marketplace. Rest the entire green shrub that you see out here is just a grass cover crop, which adds biodiversity in the picture that's shown here in an almond orchard, which aids in nutrient cycling and provides habitat for beneficial insects while also building soil organic matter. Very, very important. This is how a cover crop looks like in picture. Unpopular concept of nitrogen carbon credits. Various factors that affect nitrogen or nitrous oxide emissions provide opportunity to farmers to change their farming practices to reduce emissions. So we were talking about no tilling, but then the question is, what do I do? If I have to sow a seed, I have to till a land. Not necessarily. There are agricultural techniques, technology practices available now where you place nitrogen with the right depth in the soil by opting for no-till method. No-till method is where you directly plant the seed under the earth without tilling up the whole 1 acre of land by tractor, by plow, whatever. No-till is a farming practice that falls under regenerative agriculture because tilling causes desertification over a period of time. Farmers have a huge role to play in this climate change process. Farm practices could definitely help a lot in bringing down the carbon footprints. GHG emissions, prescribed grazing, nitrogen management, cover crops, no-till, this can definitely have a very, very significant impact on reducing carbon emissions and also absorbing more and more carbon from the atmosphere. Sustainable farming for a better world. It is the farming practice that meets the needs of existing and future generations while ensuring profitability, environmental health, social and economic equity. It involves all those practices which preserve soil fertility, which prevent water pollution, and which protect biodiversity. It's a way to support achievement of UN Sustainable Development Goals and the cherished objective of zero hunger. How sustainable agriculture can really make a difference to the environment? Sustainable agricultural practices use almost about 55% less energy per unit of crop produced, creates 64% lesser greenhouse gas emissions per hectare, and supports greater levels of biodiversity. That's how sustainable agriculture can really make a difference to the environment. Sustainable agriculture is economically viable. CSR, there is a business case for CSR. CSR is not charity, it's not philanthropy. It's a business proposition. It helps a business, yes, not only in terms of branding, not only to become a good corporate citizen, not only to comply with Section 135 of meeting the requirements of CSR expenditure, but also generate cash, generate incremental cash. Why not? If it is not profitable, any project, it's not going to be sustainable. It may be there for 1 year, 2 year, few years, but if you want a project to be sustainable, it has to be profitable. It has to be socially supportive. The quality of life of the farmers, their families, and the entire community of farmers, how does it support the farmers, the farm families, and the farm communities in terms of the quality of life improvement is very important. And it is ecologically sound. We must preserve the resource base that sustains us all, because there is no planet B. We have only one planet which has been handed over to us by our past generations, and we have a moral responsibility of keeping it intact in the same manner and handing it over to future generations, because there's no planet B. Sustainability happens when you build healthy soil, you prevent erosion, manage your water wisely, minimize air and water pollution, store more carbon on the farm, increase your resilience to extreme weather, climate change, and you promote biodiversity. All these practices are part and parcel of sustainable farming. So what needs to be done? We are the advocates, certified social auditors. We're going to play a huge role in the social sector development going forward within India in terms of providing a link and interface between the corporates, the government, and the society, the people, especially the agriculturists, the farmers. We got to tell them, in order to make a transition or change to sustainability, you have to improve the efficiency of the use of resources. You have to follow direct action to conserve and protect natural resources. Agriculture that fails to protect and improve rural livelihoods and social well-being is not sustainable. It's definitely unsustainable. Sustainable agriculture will enhance the resilience of the people. They will become more resilient. Good governance is essential for sustainability. So ESG, regenerative farming, sustainable farming, is an interface between E and S primarily, but there is also a governance dimension to it. Good governance is essential for sustainability of both natural and human systems. So what are certain sustainable agricultural practices? Rotation of crops, embracing diversity. Planting a variety of crops can have many benefits. Healthier soil. Crop diversity practices include intercropping, growing a mix of crops in the same area at the same time, And also, this could involve complex multi-year crop rotations. Then we talk about planting cover crops so that nothing is left bare, no part of the earth is left bare. Reducing or eliminating tillage. Don't till. So what do? Insert seeds directly into undisturbed soil. What is no tilling? Insert seeds directly into undisturbed soil. This can help you reduce erosion and can improve soil health. Apply integrated pest management. Integrated livestock and crops. Industrial growing body of evidence shows smart integration of crop and animal production can make the farms more efficient and sustainable and profitable. Adopting agroforestry practices. By mixing trees, shrubs, farmers can provide shade and shelter that
Sir?
protect. Yes, please.
How one carbon is measured? One carbon credit?
So there are certain benchmarks and levels for that. 1 ton of carbon, when it is increased in a particular acre of land, that gives you 1 carbon credit. Roughly, that's the benchmark. In some of the countries, they use the criteria of 3 tons of carbon, but normally on an average, they look for 1 ton of carbon increase in 1 acre of land over a period of time will generate 1 carbon credit.
What is the market value of that one carbon credit?
$8, sir. Roughly about $8 to $20 in the market.
Okay, thank you. Sir.
800 rupees, roughly 800 to 2000 rupees, sir. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
Integration irrigation techniques in sustainable farming. Smart irrigation techniques will use less water. Managing whole system and landscape. Sustainable farming treats uncultivated land as integral to the farm. Natural vegetation within or around crop fields can help control erosion, reduce nutrient runoff, and support bees and other pollinators and biodiversity in general. Permaculture, permanent agriculture and culture. Permaculture is another important aspect of sustainable agriculture. Permaculture initiates and imitates naturally established ecosystem with their diversity, stability, and harmony. The choice of sustainable agricultural activities that we have discussed varies from place to place and will depend upon the crop type, which can be grown in that particular area, depending upon the climate, depending upon the soil, and the farm-specific practices. So the best practice to follow is that of holistic management of the whole system. Agriculture, not for agriculture's sake. Agriculture should be intertwined. It has interlinkage with the entire biodiversity and the ecosystem. You should not do something for your benefit which distorts the balance of ecosystem on some other aspect. That's what we call holistic management of whole system, where all elements are interconnected and they are equally taken care of as part of your practices. Healthy living soil promotes healthy crops, holds water like a sponge, prevents pollution, and helps ensure that farmers and their communities can thrive. With countries across the world making climate commitments, the interplay of carbon credit markets with farmers is likely to evolve and grow very, very fast in the coming years. And given the multifaceted benefits of an increase in soil carbon levels, it may just be the nudge that leads to increase in regenerative and sustainable agricultural practices that will also help us in combating climate change. The tripod that we have: sustainability, productivity, employment, technology intervention. This is what is meant by the holistic management system. In agriculture, we should follow a holistic management system where we take care of productivity, employment, technology intervention, as well as maintaining sustainability by way of low carbon emission and usage. So to close out, 4 emerging areas of action for all of us. Advocate sustainable agricultural practice, which has a positive environmental and social outcome. Develop and design ecosystem services market so that farmers can capture new value and move and transition to regenerative agriculture. Look at creating social equity in your regenerative agricultural practices and build farmers' access, reach, so that they can actually generate income by way of regenerative farming practices. It must be commercially viable. Only then farmers will move towards sustainable agricultural practices. So all of us as social auditors, as social sector professionals, have a very, very key role to play in building up sustainable farming ecosystem. This is what we ideally want the entire earth to look like. Everything should be green. That's where we look at. A picture is worth more than 1,000 words. Thank you so much for joining me on this session today. It was great having you with us. We'll continue our efforts to provide educative, knowledge-based seminars, webinars from time to time. Look forward to you joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Can I ask you a question,
Yes,
sir?
please. Absolutely.
Sir, it's a wonderful presentation and, of course,
Thank you.
very thought-provoking.
Thank you.
You know, we as firms have started actually to sort of work on a lot of BRSR,
Very
also
good.
on
Very
sustainability. But there is
Yes.
a huge challenge in the carbon credit domain in agriculture. The bigger challenge actually is that carbon credit actually endows to the farmer. Farmers are now aggregating themselves as FPOs too. The challenge that comes by is that they're not sure on how the carbon credits can actually be achieved, because one is to educate them largely on Verra, UNFCCC, and so on and so forth, the bodies actually that provide for verification, as also to sort of give the carbon credits. The challenge that also comes by is the issue of taxation. Carbon credits have now been taxed in income tax at a
Yes.
specified rate.
Yes.
Which is a 115 BBG, which is 10%. But unfortunately, the farmers basically treat all income as exempt to date, because agricultural income has been exempt.
I know.
Anachronistically. So
Yes.
The challenge is how to sort of basically get to doing sustainable, even though a lot of farmers today, because of the interventions of multinationals wanting to buy it from them, have moved on to actual sustainable farming. And we are reporting that sustainable farming part in the BRSR. It is hard to commercialize it because they are actually having a very obfuscated view of whether they should get into it, whether they will be taxed, whether their other structures will also be taxed, and so on and so forth. So how does one actually sort of get to, on the practical side, move from the concept of sustainable farming, which willy-nilly, I believe a lot of the farmers have started to do, but not being able to commercialize it?
Very true, sir. Very true. I think as of today, not many of us are really aware about the intricacies of sustainable farming, carbon credit generation, its measurement, its encashment, monetization. Not many of us, I mean, even from the professionals group, I mean, we are all professionals sitting out here. Not many of us have a deep and, intensive understanding of the entire process. So one thing is to educate ourselves, get better in terms of our knowledge, in terms of our understanding of the whole process. And then on one side, talk to governments, what can be done with a view to facilitating sustainable practices, getting adopted, and the carbon credit market, how does it actually work in the marketplace? On the other side, getting in touch with farmers and the FPOs, nudging them, providing them the hand-holding support, how they can convert all this into monetary benefit for themselves. That's where we professionals have a role to play. I mean, in every country, not only in India, even in the advanced countries, there's not much of an awareness about the carbon credit process and the whole structure for that matter. Everybody is learning as of now. Maybe we are slightly behind as compared to the other countries, but in other countries also, there's not much of a headway which has been made as of now. So it's a growing stream of thought. It's a growing stream of education. We all need to educate ourselves, learn more, learn deeply, and then start interfacing between different parties, the different stakeholders, the government, the corporates, the FPOs, the farmers. That's where we professionals probably have a role to play. That's my take on this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Gupta ji. Very nice presentation you have made. But these carbon credits actually not necessarily in agriculture, but in industry also collecting the carbon environment and
that.
directly sending it to the earth.
Absolutely, you are right, sir. This
Yeah.
presentation is only focused on agriculture,
Yeah.
but there are many corporates who are showing carbon credit as part of other income, which is a huge revenue that they are showing in the annual report. You check out, many companies are doing that. SRF Limited, one, check out. A huge amount they have earned by way of carbon credits over a period of time.
Yes.
So you're very right. It's applicable for various industrial activities, corporate houses also. But the topic that I discussed today was only focused on agriculture. Maybe some other time I'll talk about impact on corporate houses also. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
जॉब है कागज क्या करता है इनके वजह से सिखाने बंद जाते हैं जाके क्या करेगा